You're tuning into the Careering with Cameron podcast, your safe place for asking all the dumb questions about finding a job. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today on Careering with Cameron. I am joined by my friend and trusted colleague, Shannon Johnston, who will be talking to us a little bit about having a presence, not only when networking, but also in job search. Shannon is an expert at working with people who are both accomplished in their career, they've been working for a while, and they just need some help with how do I go and make a very good first impression or second impression, but also working with students who are coming to us and they're nervous, right? About the whole, I'm going to my first networking event, I'm going on my first interview, I'm not sure what to say or how to act or what to do. Shannon has a course that she brings people to get help with that, but she also offers one-to-one coaching, and she has done a fantastic job in working with some of our collective clients. And so I wanted to have her on today because I know many of you will be, fingers crossed, attending lots of networking activities through the holidays. And so I wanted to share some of her wisdom today to help you with those holiday networking events. So Shannon, thanks for joining us today and for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
So give us a little bit of background. How did you kind of figure out like, this is what you want to be coaching people on?
So I coach people on a variety of things, as you mentioned, but networking and really creating that first strong impression came about in a very unexpected way. First of all, for me, I was terrible at it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it for much of my career. You know, I was at one company for 13 years, then the next for 10. And I think when we sit in a role for a long time in the same company, we start to feel like we don't really need to, right? Like I'm not going anywhere, so I'm here. And then what happens is the first time you actually want to shift into something else, you have not maintained, you haven't cultivated a network. So I learned that the hard way. I learned how to improve it through another connection of mine, Adam Connors. I'll give him a shout out. He's sort of like a guru of network. He came on my podcast. We had a great conversation about it, and he completely changed my mind about everything. And sure, we'll talk about some of those ways and some of the change in thinking that I've had myself. So I wanted to impart that to others. I had a request for a course on how to create a really powerful introduction statement or an elevator pitch. And here we are. It's like one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Awesome. So your background also is HR, moving into professional speaker, moving into coaching, and kind of pulling all those things together, not only in for-profit, but also nonprofit of some very, very large organizations. So you have seen an awful lot of presentations to know what they look like coming in and they're great and what they look like coming in and they're uncomfortable or nervous, right? So we all get nervous. When you're working with people and they are coming to you for that help around like, how do I make a good impression? How do I network well? Like, what do you focus on with them to kind of get them started with the help that they need?
Yeah, I think the first thing is a lot of people have anxiety around it, number one. So we have to get past that. It all starts with mindset. A lot of people feel sort of an ick, as I describe it, like I have to go to this function and I have to sell myself because I'm looking for a job, or I want to pitch a product or a service or something that I want to get into. And so they immediately feel like it's all about them. And the reality is it's the complete opposite. You know, it's really switching your mindset to understand that you have to approach it with curiosity, authenticity, and really be interested in other people. If you are not genuinely interested in other people, it will be challenging for you to network. What is the sort of right side of it all is that it takes the pressure off of you. Because really all you're trying to do is find out about other people, and in doing so, create hopefully engaging conversations and meeting interesting people. But it's really about starting with the shift of the mindset to, it's really not about you. It's about the people you're talking to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read a post recently that was the secret to networking is to lead with help. And what can you offer to someone? It's very similar to what you were saying in terms of, going in looking to help people, not looking to make it about you. And, we've had this conversation back and forth a few times around like, sometimes we're not professional networkers. There are times when we're like the ick, shall we say. And I can remember, this is years ago, but I can remember getting to networking events and like staying in the car and literally just watching people go in and being like, I don't want to go in there. Like, I'm good. I don't need to do it. And I had done it 1,000 times, but it was just for some reason that day I was like, no, I'm not doing it. So it does happen. I always get a kick out of the fact that people are like, well, you're like a professional networker. It's probably no problem. You always have to get your game on. And I don't care how long you've been doing it. You can always learn something from talking to somebody about how to network. So I love the fact that you have focused on this as well to help people, regardless of what age they're at in terms of their career, that they will probably need some help. And especially highlighting the example you gave, which is you're in a job, you don't need to network until you do. And usually when you do, it's later than when you should have.
Yeah. I think the other piece of that, which is I thought I didn't need to network because I was in these organizations, that's not actually true. And the reality is you're always networking for your career, right? So let's say you're in, a small, medium, or large size organization. I mean, you need to be able to talk about yourself competently, right? Let's say you're in the break room and the CEO and you ask, what do you do? And you're sort of like this jumbled mess. Well, that's not a great impression, right? If you have to go into an internal interview, you're looking to advance where you are. You still need to be able to do that. You need to be able to make authentic connections with people. We don't work in vacuums, I think maybe if you're in like a lab working with mice, but 99.9% of people need to be able to communicate, make connections. And so this is just really a different form of communication. But whether you're going into that event, sitting in your car, which I so really have to get your energy up sometimes for those types of events, but you're always networking. Maybe you go to a conference for your role that you're currently in, and maybe you're, speaking with a vendor and you need to help them understand what it is you do and how you bring value. So I think it's broadening your concept from standing in some hotel lobby with box wine, drinking to people, and talking to people, broaden that. It's more than those events. It really is.
So how do you start, in terms of helping people? What are some tricks that you can say, this is something you could incorporate when they get started with you?
I think the first thing, we talk about mindset, but I think the first sort of tangible that I do with people, which really seems to help, is to actually take the time to write out what you would say. And you think, well, that's sort of, I'm just going to say my name and my role. And those things are important. But what you really want to do is work on how you articulate your value. So I always say it's about who you are, what you do, why it matters. And the why it matters piece is always the hardest. People say, I don't know. I mean, I'm a recruiter, or I don't know, I'm a salesperson. Okay, what's the difference? I mean, anyone can just read a laundry list of your responsibilities. So if you're a recruiter, it's like I hire talented people to support, my organization. And we can think of some even better ways to say that. The problem is most people have never sat down and really thought about it.
Very true.
Right? They just go yeah, I'm Shannon. And then someone goes, what do you do? And I have a funny story, actually. I tell this in my Pitch Perfect class, where I was, as you said, in HR for many, many years. So I led several different HR departments in a variety of sectors and industries. And then suddenly I was an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about how I was going to introduce myself, but I was working on it. One night I go to the gym. This is very early on when I first started my company, and I'm at the gym. So who's thinking about any networking, right? I walk in, I'm chatting with one of the instructors who I really didn't know very well. He's talking about his job, and he starts to describe that he is essentially an event planner. And because I do professional speaking and I was just starting out in that game, I mean, that is like just getting an email response from an event planner is huge, right? Now, here's one standing in front of me, and he's describing that he plans events for thousands of people. So I am like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so I blurt out, I go, well, I'm a speaker. What do you talk about? And then I said a whole bunch of nonsense. No sense at all. I said things about resilience and confidence and this and that. And then he said at one point, oh, do you charge? And I said things like, well, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. It was so great. And that's technically true, but it sounded half nuts. So I was so upset, the whole class, the whole week. And that was really the genesis of me creating a session and helping people to sit down and really think about it. And we do, role plays and kind of talk through. But once someone gets it kind of on paper, or usually I tell people, write the pitch or the introduction on your phone, because then you will always have it and it should always evolve. Once people do that, they go yeah, okay, I can do this. I think I could probably talk to someone and get the conversation started. That's the first step.
Okay. That's excellent. And I think to your point, especially with career change happening, what do you say? How do you start? Where do you come from with what you do? And I see this an awful lot with people who are in career transition, they don't know how to anchor to anything because they don't have, quote unquote, an employer. That's an example where I could see that come in very handy, having that prepared before going to a networking event, along with the having a business card to be able to give somebody so that they can find you and you can find them, ideally. But that's very true. The being prepared is a big thing. And I think the message, probably because of me being the recipient right now, is also interesting, which is no matter how long you've been networking, it's very easy to lose train of what is it that I do? Why does this matter? Especially as your kind of priorities may shift in terms of what you're focused on, the projects you're working on. So that's great feedback in terms of having that in front of you all the time, looking it over. Is there a time period that you recommend people look over that write-up?
You mean a time period in which, like, before they're going out to network, or
like how often should they review that, right?
It's a great question. Also, just before I answer that, I want to touch on something because I think it's really important. It is very common for people in transition and also recent college graduates to say, well, who am I, right? I'm not VP of HR anymore. I felt that myself when I started my company and I went to my first networking event and I was like, oh, I'm just Shannon who has her own company, like some random, right? I'm not associated with anything. It even happens where people stop interacting, let's say on LinkedIn. They say, oh, I don't have anything to offer right now because I'm not employed or I'm not affiliated with a college or a university. So that's a huge moment for people to understand that you are not your role, right? You're not your role, whether you had a role, whether you're in transition, because you have to offer something of yourself that's authentic and real. And your role, yes, that might be what you're doing, but that's not the essence of who you are, right? So that's really what starts a genuine connection. I want to just mention that because I think a lot of people get really hung up. They feel like they're losers or something because, oh my God, I'm in transition and I'm going to look like I'm here begging for a role. Like you say right now, because I'm so depressed. So it's the complete opposite of that. It's time to really get connected to who you are because, this is a bit off topic, but, life happens and you may be in transition multiple times in your life. Letting go of that value that you connected to your occupation as like your identity. So I just want to mention that, but how often should you update it and how often should you be looking at your introduction? I would say a couple of things. First of all, I always tell people write out the core of it, then you might massage it, have it be a little bit different if you're talking to someone, let's say at the formal networking event, if you're interviewed versus if you're at a conference versus if you're talking to your boss or for another executive. So there might be ways that you would want to tweak that, right? But your pitch or your power statement should evolve just like your career and your skill sets evolve. So I hope people get a look. Maybe you have a new project with something that you're now specializing in for musician. What have you learned? If there any time you have any transition? So it's just like your resume, but we don't tend to update our resumes unless we're looking for a job. Your PowerPoint should be continual evolution, who you are.
So I have a question, which I did not warn you about. I want to go back to you being in an HR capacity because I think this will be very helpful to our whole audience, which is, to your point, you're not always ready with your who am I and what do I do, right? What's interesting about that, and as you were speaking about, having it ready for an executive, is how many times in an HR capacity did you see an executive say, I just met this person and this is what they're doing, and I'd like to talk to them about this role over here because of the impression that they made?
All the time. In fact, if it's an organization that's doing succession planning where executives and one or two levels down are having actual discussions about the talent, it's definitely going to come up. And look, to be honest, sometimes someone who's several layers away from the person that they met in, let's say, the break room, they might have an unnaturally positive view of the person, right? And you're like, okay, it was good that they were nice to you, but point is that person got noticed, was able to talk about themselves intelligently, right? Mm-hmm. And more likely than not, they probably do have it together and they probably are good at their jobs. So yeah, that conversation happens. And even if it's not formal succession planning, as the head of HR reporting to several different CEOs, I would often get, hey, what do you think of so-and-so? I saw them talk about XYZ, or they gave a presentation at another meeting. And so it happens all the time. So the fact that you need to be ready to talk that level of the organization is very real.
I'm going to tell a real quick story. So I have another friend who's in HR, and she ended up she was looking for a job. Her son wanted to go on a camping trip with the scouts. She was like, I'll go. This will be a great time to detach, not have any connections, not have a phone, no cell phone, no any of that stuff. So they're sitting around second night of the camp out, and they're, grungy and dirty and smoky and everything else. Anyway, she's sitting across the campfire, and one of the people that's there said, what do you do? And she shared that she was looking for a new opportunity in HR, and this is where she was, and was hoping to find something new, soon. He ends up hiring her like the following week, went through a formal interview process. But the connection happened there. And so to your point, you never know when you need to have it ready. So I love writing it out. I love having it on your phone. I love rehearsing it. An audience to rehearse it to. Your friends, mirror, pets, what do you think?
Yeah, I think role playing is really helpful. Saying the words out loud is helpful. One of the things I teach people is that they really need to have a compelling opening. A lot of people get stuck in, hi, I'm Shannon. I work for ABC company. It's a very large company. And, by the attention span,
asleep.
It's like 8 seconds. And that's if you're lucky. People tune out. There's a lot going on. There's if you're in and off, there's a lot of movement. If you're at a networking event, it's loud, the box wine, you've got the music, all that's going on. People will tune out. So one of the things I say is you can start with a question, a compelling fact, statistic, something that's interesting and kind of pulls someone into a conversation. So I'll just give you my example, which is, hi, I'm Shannon Clark Johnston. I help people build unshakable confidence. Now, people will go, well, that's not a complete pitch. Like, they're right, because a pitch is, or an elevator speech, as it's sometimes called, is a conversation. And so what you're trying to do is just start a conversation. Right. So no, that's not like my complete, and because the idea is someone will go, oh, wow, like that's interesting. How do you do that? That's like, well, I do that through speaking engagements, training, coaching, just a variety of ways to really help people build that as the foundation for their success. So it's not about getting it all out in one shot, right? It's about the back and forth. So what's really helpful to your question is when people practice that with someone and they're not so like, oh my God, I have to say this 30-second pitch really perfectly. And they get used to the language and maybe tweak it from there. I think it becomes a bit more natural.
I love the not getting it all out. I think we have a tendency also that once our mouth opens, it's like, I need to tell you everything right now.
Oh, I've met those people.
All the time you meet them. All the time. I think important, subtle reminder as well, that when you meet somebody, you're not intended to marry them the first time you meet them. Save something for later.
Yes.
And please do. Do you think, I hear a fair amount of this, and we've talked about this in the past. Not everybody knows that they need help with their presence. How do you help those folks to understand that it can be better? How do we help them?
Yeah, there should be like a presence police or something.
Right, exactly.
The other thing is, I talk about this. Actually, I have a new talk coming out about this term executive presence. And people hear that a lot. And I think that it's sort of simultaneously something people aspire to and despise. It's like most of the time we picture what we see, which is all sizzle, no steak. We picture executives that are really well dressed, seem as cool as a cucumber, but there's like kind of nothing behind the eyes and not a lot of, grit there. So, but we know we need it. And we're like, how do we get that? Or do I want that? And that's a whole sort of separate discussion, because I do think executive presence is BS. I think what you should be going for is authenticity, right? And that's different for everyone. And so a lot of times what you're seeing when you see people that have an issue with their presence is they're trying to be something they're not. They're trying to follow some kind of weird playbook, or they read a book about it and they're trying to be that. You said before this concept of this being grounded in how how networking should be grounded in that. And I've actually been confronted with people who've read probably that same article, and it's like comes across as really salesy. Well, how can I help you? And you're like, I know what you're doing to me.
Yes, exactly. I'd like you to owe me one. So how about we start there? Yes.
And right after you tell me, I'm going to try and sell you.
Exactly.
So, that's just not authentic, and it turns people off. And what can turn people off, as we were just talking about, this sort of like, I am going to get my entire pitch out and I'm going to bombard you with it, and I'm not going to let you go to the restroom or anywhere else for the next 10 to 15 minutes while I dominate your time, right? So, I guess the short answer to your question is people don't always know, right? And when they come to me, they're like, something is off. And so something's not working for me. So usually that comes after some getting to know the person and where the pain points are. Sometimes, honestly, seeing them in action, which is hard to do in my shoes as a coach. But I would just say, if you're not getting traction, if you feel like I'm just not connecting with people, it's happening on not just at formal networking, I'm interviewing, that's a big one, right? So people are interviewing and they're not, hitting the mark and they're not getting the roles. Of course, there could be a lot of reasons. You and I know this, like what's going on behind the scenes, you never actually really know. It can be a competitive market depending on the role. But if you're really seeing, you're like, I'm qualified for these, something's off. I think working with someone to kind of diagnose that, it's not a technical issue where you know the content. All right, let's role play. How are you answering these questions? And honestly, 90% of the time when I'm coaching someone in search, that is the issue. If they're trying to be something they're not comfortable with in these interviews, and they're coming across as stiff, or that they're bad communicators and they're nervous a lot of the time. But that's the work of, all right, let's just get it out loud, say it out loud. And then I give very real feedback. We're trying to protect people's feelings, but really just saying like, okay, let's try this another way. Yeah, I think that sometimes you don't know, but you need to ask for help if something's not working.
Yeah, I think, and that is a source of frustration for most people who are in search mode looking for something new, is there's a lot of times you never know. You never know what happened or how it went down, or you may get the cookie cutter responses around like why you're not the candidate. But having a presentation that is well thought, that is, I would say, also prepared / researched, because I think that nervousness can also come from not being ready for that interview. And then also the elephant in the room, which is my resume was created by AI. And okay, fine, that can be tweaked. But if your resume is saying things that you don't necessarily know, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. So being ready with what's actually real, right? And making sure that you're not saying things that are not, which is very helpful.
Yes, because I do resumes and like a lot of people do say, I'm just going to do your code or whatever your AI choice is. And you absolutely can, but it isn't going to sound like you. And also, what is so cool that I love about the resumes is that when you have the conversation, and I'll have an hour out and have a conversation with someone, and this is really their paper, networking, right? This is a piece of paper that presents them. When we talk through accomplishments and their experience, you can see their confidence rise, right? They're like, oh yeah, and then I did this, and then I also did that, and then we have this long conversation that really gets them in touch with their experience in a very intimate way, and then I put it together on a piece of paper for them, and seeing that is like, whoa, like I feel good now going out and interviewing. And so you're absolutely right. Like, I think the number one problem is people lack confidence in those situations. It is nerve-wracking. It absolutely is. But we're not going to get confidence like miraculously. You have to work at it. You have to, like you said, research. You have to write down how you're going to introduce yourself, how you're going to separate, stand apart from other candidates. Mm-hmm. So building confidence of any kind, and this is also one of the areas that I work in, all about putting in the work. You're not just like born confident. Nobody is. It's doing the things that are uncomfortable. That's like getting out of the car at the networking.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I don't want to go here, but I'm going to do it. And then guess what? It gets easier, So appreciate you saying that, because I think it's becoming really commonplace that people are just putting stuff into AI, letting it spit out. Also, I think the recruiters reviewing resumes can tell.
Absolutely. Is the favorite type of person in terms of like career level, whatever it may be, that you like to help?
Well, really people that are ready. They're just really ready to do that work I was talking about. I mean, people say it all the time, you got to do the work, but it's true. I mean, if you show up and think I am going to be, or any coach is going to be this miracle and just do something for you, it just doesn't work like that. I think I'm really good at helping people stay accountable. I'm a very practical, results-driven coach where I like to, say, oh, let's have some goals for the week. Let's do a check-in. I'm not like grading homework or anything like that, but I like to give people tools. Like, this is a fun, assessment. You don't have to do it, but it can help you learn more about yourself or whatever the case may be. So I think my favorite client to work with is just someone who's really motivated to change. They've either had an event that has happened. Sometimes it's losing their job, or it's an epiphany. If I work with a lot of people who have gone through a transition, they're out of the career that they've been in for years and years and years. Helped several people that have been in a role for over 20, 25 years, and you want to be a 180. So I love that.
because they're right, and they know they're right.
Do you see a fair amount of people who are also in an organization, but they feel like maybe they're not the ones selected to promote? And really what it comes down to is not so much that they don't know the organization or the work, but maybe it's that presentation. Are you seeing a lot of those?
Yeah, and that's the most heartbreaking one if they're really good at what they do. Of course, it could be a lot of things, but I think a lot of it is they're not promoting themselves.
Yep.
Now, I talk to people all the time. They're like, well, I just don't want to sound like I'm bragging. And I'm like, you're going into an interview.
Exactly.
If there's any time to brag, it's now. Like
your mom can't come with you. Right, exactly.
Like, bragging is, conference is like you're saying things that are not true. When you're just promoting yourself in a way that is real, again, authentic, and it's based on your experience or the school you went to or whatever that case may be, that's not bragging. That's self-promotion in a very positive way in the right, environment. So I think some people just don't feel comfortable with it. And it all goes back to a lack of confidence. It's like for whatever reason or reasons, they just aren't able to articulate that value. And it's also, I think, sometimes comfort. People stay in the same role. They know that they're sort of being taken advantage of or ignored or whatever it is. And they're just like, it's too much of a hassle to go get into a role. So I'm just going to stay here. But that's never a good idea because your skill sets, it will stand still. And working in a way in which you're bored is never a recipe for disaster.
That's very true. And I think at some point you have to change with the world and with your job. And so you got to keep that sword sharp.
I think with networking and what we're talking about here, a lot of it's just like you're leading a more interesting life. I always say that to people. Like I go to networking events now all the time and so many interesting people that had nothing to do with giving me any kind of business. They just are interesting. They're life enriching. Some have become friends. Some have become referrals, but mostly it's just like meeting people in my community or people in my professional community. And it's just made more fun. I mean, I know I'm a people person, but I think it's true. Again, even if you're an introvert, maybe you just need your alone time. But I think we want to connect with other people. We're seeing that now. I mean, the dating apps have seen like a dip in usage because younger people now are looking for speed dating, like events, like in-person events to meet others. We've also overseeing that younger generation, like Gen Z, more interested in going to church for that kind of a connection. So people want in-person connection. You can't operate, like I said before, in a vacuum. I just don't think it's healthy, and I don't think it's certainly going to be good to career.
Yeah. It's interesting to see the amount of change that's coming into the workforce from multiple generations. And, some very diverse thought around not only just people, but work and how to work. It's a exciting time in work, I think, in terms of how that's all going to work together. So that's great. So I like to ask all of our guests the same question in wrap up, because I think that part of why we do what we do, right, is to help people figure this out. And I think a lot of listeners are at a point where they're like, well, I don't really know. So Shannon, what's your why?
My why is what I said in terms of my statement, my power statement, which is to help people build unshakable confidence. And I do that because, of course, I myself, I wasn't as confident as I wanted to be. I changed schools a lot when I was a kid. I went to 5 or 6 different elementary schools, moved around a lot and felt like maybe in certain points in time, I wasn't good enough. So my why is to help other people. I've had a certain degree of success in my career and in my life. So I feel like it's so awesome to see other people blossom and to move into that sort of more confident role would be.
I love that. It's similar to the example you gave in sitting with them and helping to build their resume and going through their accomplishments. I would imagine it's similar when you have kind of taught them how to find that confidence in themselves and to see them change, right? Must be very rewarding.
I love it. I mean, it's not great for my coaching business because, the sooner they get a job, then I'm out of a job. But no, I mean, you're not meant to see a coach, your whole life. It's not like a Freudian endeavor. You're to be targeted and have it be a goal. But yeah, it is very, very rewarding for sure.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your thoughts on building a presence, finding a presence, maintaining a presence. How can folks get in touch with you if they'd like to get some help from you or attend your class?
Sure. Well, they can email me at Shannon, SHANNON, at true-hr.com. And my website is ShannonClarkJohnston.com. And that's Clark with no E. ShannonClarkJohnston.com. Yeah. And all
Perfect.
my podcasts are there and all the information about business.
Excellent. And we will tag your organization and you in the notes podcast when it comes out.
Thank
So
you.
we'll have that up there to reach you as well. As we always say, if you enjoyed today's session or you're thinking, I know somebody who should listen to this, make sure you subscribe, make sure you send it to them, give us 5 stars, say hello, drop a comment or two, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. See you soon.
Thank you.
Stay in the loop at careeringwithcameron.com/talent connect or check out our website, www.talent-connect.net.